Morning, everyone. My name is Eileen. I'm the platform manager at Slauson, so I work very closely with Britt, who's also on the platform team, to just really support the founders in our portfolio. Yes, it's great to meet everyone and exciting to be here. And I'll pass it over to Nikki.
Thanks, Eileen. Hey, everybody. I'm Mickey Reynolds. I'm the head of programs for Slauson. I run our accelerator program, Friends and Family, as well as thinking up new programs that push our mission forward. I'm typically in Los Angeles, but coming to you live from Michigan Tech Week in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Waverly, go for it.
Thanks, Nikki. Hi, everyone. I'm Waverly. Great to meet you all. I'm an investment associate with Slauson, so helping support our pre-investment and investment due diligence efforts, and work closely with Jesús on that.
Thanks, team. And then myself, I'm Jesús. I'm a principal with the firm, leading up the majority of our pre-investment efforts, and then post-investment support our founders whenever they're raising a subsequent round of financing. In terms of Slauson Co, at a high level, we're a $75 million pre-seed and seed fund rooted in economic inclusion. How that shows up initially is through our two primary areas of investment. Our B2B thesis is SMB tech, which we define as tools to support the next generation of small business owners. And then our consumer thesis is what we call culturally aligned consumer, which refers to companies building scalable products and services that are targeting overlooked customers. We're typically investing in or between $250K up to $2 million, usually leading deals. We have 36 portfolio companies through our first fund. And we also have an accelerator called Friends and Family. Our secret, not so secret sauce comes across in our name. So Slauson is a prominent thoroughfare in Los Angeles that cuts across culturally rich but systemically disenfranchised communities, cutting into one of the wealthiest communities of color in the nation. And so we like to think about that serving as an analogy for the journey we hope for our founders, their teams, their communities, employees in terms of wealth creation. And we hope to accomplish that by leveraging the second part of our name, the and Co, which we refer to as the company we keep. This includes, but is not limited to, our investors. And that spans some of the big techs, Google, Meta, PayPal, et cetera, some late stage venture capital firms, notable individual venture capitalists, artists, operators, and founders of extremely prominent organizations that are excited about opening up their Rolodexes or lending their expertise in support of our founders and their company's mission. But getting into the first one of today, and again, very biasly so, we have our own accelerator, which is called Friends and Family, but we'll mention that a little bit more in a second. At a high level, when folks talk about accelerators, they're talking about a program with a clear defined timeline, and it's meant to both operationally or financially accomplish a set of goals for the company. Usually it comes with some sort of equity investment, i.e. an organization is giving you capital and other resources in exchange for ownership. That ownership varies somewhat widely, but generally speaking, it's in the single digits. So mid to high single digits. And generally speaking, it's something south of $200,000 that they're going to be investing. In terms of stage, the way that I like to think about it is ties to the name itself. If you're going to accelerate something, ideally you have a product that can be accelerated. So generally speaking, for example, for our Friends and Family program, it's not a hard requirement that you have to be post-product, but undeniably, we're going to have hundreds and probably thousands of applications. And so we know that people get, and Mickey can probably speak to this more than I can, and she's been doing this for a number of years now, people that get the most out of the program are those that are able to actually test, iterate, and implement some of what they're learning real time. And if you're pre-product at the idea stage, that's not bad, but you're less able to apply some of what you're learning. And so we want to make sure that people get out as much as they can from the program and experience itself. And so again, that generally lends itself to being post-product. Now, post-product doesn't necessarily mean post-revenue. There's a lot of different business models. You're going to pivot a dozen times before you know it. And so there is some flexibility there. But again, in terms of company stage, usually it's post-product. MVP is fine. And those are a couple of examples of organizations. Again, we mentioned our Friends and Family program, but there's a bunch that other folks mentioned. Other folks talked about 500 startups as well. And then the small asterisk, because there are some programs that do offer non-equity investment capital, like the ones from Google or Amazon, which are amazing. Wish there are more of those. There should be, but those are similar structure in terms of programming, but they don't take ownership. I'm going to pause here because I blew through that, but generally speaking, accelerators are the most commonly known. A lot of you, whenever you signed up, were most familiar with accelerators, but I'll do a quick pause here. If folks have any experience with participating in any of the programs already that they want to share in terms of insights or anything that I'm missing here that you really want to call out, would really welcome people to share that. Don't be shy.
Yeah, so I did I was a part of a startup that went through Techstars NYC, wow, 10 years ago now, just a long time ago. And it was exceptionally helpful. And I think to underscore your point, Jesus, the companies that got the most out of it were those that had a product, because there was just something more tangible there that people could work with, as opposed to just like refining a pitch or just like reaching out to investors. Because that's really where at least we saw the companies that came out of that then went on to raise the most money were those that showed traction, showed revenue, that they were hitting metrics and not just, I guess, higher level company goals that didn't ultimately reflect like a healthy business. And yet you need a product to reflect the actual business. So yeah, just triple underscoring your point as someone who went through an accelerator a decade ago now, but still relevant.
I appreciate you sharing. Yeah, very helpful. You're a veteran, so I appreciate your wisdom and advice. Anybody else have any questions or other comments around any programs?
Any specific verticals that you prefer over others, by chance?
For friends and family?
Yes.
Got it. Maybe I'll actually let Mickey just do a quick voiceover about friends and family, maybe just a high level timeline and a few more details.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope y'all can hear me. They just ramped up the background music, which is great music anyway. So Friends and Family is our relaunched accelerator. So you might, if you're familiar with it, you knew it was a grant-based program. So similar to Google for Startups or AWS, we gave $25,000 in non-dilutive grants to 20 companies per cohort for 2 years. We have kind of reimagined the accelerator from the ground up around a equity-based investment. So it is $150,000 for 5% equity. So a little bit more in line with, say, like the Techstars type of accelerator program. It will be a virtual program that kicks off in March of next year. We have applications open until November 5th. In terms of what we're looking for, so there's no preferred industry that we're looking at. I think there are a couple of specific industries that we cannot work with in terms of alcohol and cannabis, but everything else is kind of open. You don't have to be aligned with the Slauson Co specific theses that Jesús outlined earlier in the presentation. So you don't have to be just SMB tech. You don't have to necessarily fall into the culturally right consumer. So I think we're looking for a wider array of companies and in industries that maybe we're not familiar with, but you are. So very open, stage-wise, like Jesús said. Ideally, at a minimum, a prototype, a testable MVP, something that people can work with and interact with, something that you've got an engagement with. But we will look at promising pre-product companies if there's some sort of specific alignment, particularly with the founder. So we really look at the founder team, what your lived experience looks like, what kind of experience you have in the industry that you're building in, whether it's personal or professional. I think those are the things that really stand out in terms of why you are uniquely positioned to build the company that you're building. So those are the things that I think really stand out, what we try to focus on versus particular industries. Hope that helps.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, and we will be having some information sessions And we can drop in the link for where you can find more information. And there's a FAQ and kind of a guide for your application itself. So a lot of resources available. And hope that if it applies to if it's particularly interesting to you, hope that you apply. If you haven't already applied, if not, feel free to share with your other founder friends. But moving along here, we'll jump into the next topic, which is incubators. And so this one is the one that's probably, at least to me, a little bit more, the most nebulous of them. And by that, I mean, sometimes these are used interchangeably with accelerators and or sometimes can be referred to as a pre-accelerator. The way that I think about them, at least, is they're different from an accelerator in that the timeline is different, whereas an accelerator, there's a start date, there's an end date, and there's a clear, at least, goals that you've set for yourself or that the program has for you. Whereas with an incubator, it's a little bit more fluid generally. And because it's more fluid, the criteria and types of resources that are available to you, there's a wide range of them, ranging from dollars that you can use for your business itself to other benefits like actual physical space, or the traditional perks, if you will, that come with a startup like AWS credits or cloud credits, etc. They sometimes have both accelerators and incubators. Some have entrepreneurs in residence or something of that nature. They typically have some sort of class or programming structure that they want you to abide by and finish. And so the timeline, again, is generally longer than accelerators. Not always are you receiving equity capital. However, they often can be or are tied to a different fund that maybe is the same name, but that's where you might be able to actually get equity capital from. And so these are a couple of names down here. This again is a little bit more of the nebulous one, but generally speaking, this is a way for different programs, particularly nonprofits, can play in this space where they really want to help a company get off the ground. And so because they might be even earlier pre-product at the idea stage, or even when you're like, hey, I'm just myself, I don't have a team, but I want to work on this idea, you might be able to tap into some of these resources to help you get the headspace, the physical space to work through something and innovate and pivot. Sometimes if you're building a hardware, they might have some other kind of tools like a 3D printer, things of that nature that you might need to, again, test and iterate. So we'll pause here again. If folks have any experiences with incubators, or if you have a better distinction of how you would differentiate an incubator from an accelerator, feel free, or if you want to just shout out any programs that you think are doing particularly good work at this stage, feel free to come off mute and share that.
I have one that I was a part of in the past. Well, there's like one and then there's another one. It was called Starting Block, and it was for socially impact entrepreneurs. And we had these different cohorts where you would meet with like 40 different people per cohort, and you would build your new ideas and have the mentorship and support to help you build. But there's no money. It's like you have a cohort of people who are social entrepreneurs who are building things. I did that in 2017. And then I don't know if this would be an incubator, but Soho House now has a Soho House Fellowship for Creative Futures. And I'm a part of that new program, but it kind of feels like an incubator. There's no money. You get access to their space and mentorship to accelerate your creative projects, but it's self-led. That's kind of usually how they feel after like one meeting. I don't know if that would be considered an incubator. It kind of goes back and forth. I feel like fellowships and incubators kind of feel the same.
Yeah. The fellowship was another
Okay.
one that I don't want to get too confused. I don't want to confuse people even more, but yeah, there are fellowships out there. Yeah, if you don't mind dropping those links to those so people can have, I think that would be super helpful. And yeah, I feel like incubators is almost a little bit of a catch-all. Like if it's not an accelerator, that's typically a 3-month program that's taking equity, then it kind of lumps into this incubator accelerator fellowship bucket. Thank you for sharing, Diamond. Anybody else have any other programs or any other experiences with incubators they want to share? Okay, if not, we'll jump into the third topic, which is venture studios. So, so this is a unique one in the sense that this is probably the most hands-on of the three, and I'd say they've gone. Accelerators have gotten extremely more popular, in my opinion, over the past decade, and venture studios that they haven't become as common as accelerators, but they're not too far behind. And so when I hear of a venture studio, that's typically an organization that is offering not just capital, but it's capital plus a lot of additional resources. So similar to an incubator in terms of additional resources that they're bringing to the table, but it's typically very concentrated. And it's typically because they're almost serving as a co-founding team member of yours. So they're really kind of in the day-to-day with you, which means that they can't do 20 or 30 companies per batch. It's typically 1 to 3, if you will. And the timeline varies because they're actually building the company with you. They are, again, on the day-to-day operations involved with you. The founder typically will be the CEO, if you will. But again, that venture studio will be just as involved, if not probably not more involved, but just as involved as that individual or individuals. Typically, I've seen that those individuals have some sort of deep expertise. Maybe they've already thought about the idea or have been noodling on some sort of idea, or they're like a 2-time founder. And if you've heard of X, the kind of the moonshot studio of Google, that's kind of a similar one that I don't have on here. But there's different ones. And again, they look for founders with very deep domain expertise or sector expertise. And they want to be hand-in-hand combat, if you will, with you. The dollars range quite vastly, again, because oftentimes it's not just dollars they're putting into. They might be actually putting in dollars by paying a technical talent or a dev shop to build a product with you, or they're building it themselves. The trade-off is that ownership is much higher than an accelerator would be. So you are getting more dollars, you are getting more resources, you are getting a lot more support specifically for your company and attention. However, that comes with exchanging more ownership. So we've seen a pretty wide range it's in the clear double digits in terms of ownership. So 30 to 60%. And I think the one asterisk that I would add here is you want to be careful if you ever go down a venture studio model, because dilution can become an issue whenever you are trying to get future rounds of financing done. It's not impossible. So I don't want to say don't do them by any means. It's just one important consideration. We personally, as a fund, have seen a couple of interesting companies that we have engaged with in conversations. And it wasn't the sole reason why we didn't continue the conversation in terms of a potential investment, but it was a consideration to say, hey, this cap table has somebody who is taking, 40 to 60% ownership. How involved are they going to be? And this is where every venture studio model is different. Like, what is the handoff once a company has left the venture studio? What does that look like? Is somebody going to come on full time? Is it they're completely removed from the company after another round of financing has been raised? That leaves a lot of questions unanswered for new investors to come in and try to figure out if it makes sense for them to get involved. So those are a couple of examples. Devland, BetaWorks, where again they'll work with you extremely early in terms of your company's life cycle, but typically again it's a founder with deep domain or sector expertise, and they're going to be putting resources to work and they will work with you themselves. I'll pause here to see if folks have any comments that I may have missed, or any experiences with any venture studio that they want to call out.
share a short anecdotal story from a founder that I know that participated in a venture studio. It was a joint venture between a venture fund and a Fortune 100 company. And so there's a lot of money, support resources going into it. They took 40%, and these are kind of pre-seed stage companies, so like ideas. Like most of the companies didn't have anything built. The entire goal of the venture studio was to get something that they could go to market with. But it made it incredibly hard for the founders to then raise subsequent rounds of funding because the venture studio had taken such a large part of it. And to Jesus's point, like, how do we ensure that the founders themselves stay incentivized when they get diluted out of that? So just something to definitely be careful of is looking very closely at any terms of any agreement you sign, whether it's for financing, for loans, for whatever it is that you're assessing to help with your business. Just make sure that you understand the terms.
Yeah, make some lawyer friends. Awesome. So just to somewhat wrap up this topic, and we can jump into Q&A, but just some things to be mindful of as you are considering any of these types of programs, depending on where you are with your business. The first one is, what kind of resources do you need? And second to that is, what goals are you trying to accomplish, which ties into the second bullet around timeline. So if you've thought through, hey, I need this amount of capital, and with that, I know I'm going to be able to accomplish X, Y, and Z in 6, 8, 12 months, what have you, then I think that can help you back into what would be a more appropriate fit based on what it is that the programs are offering. Obviously, these programs are still very selective, but it helps you better understand what you're going to get out of those programs, because that will make your application stand out. It'll help you better narrow down the funnel of organizations that you want to spend time better understanding. Talk to people who have gone through those programs to assess pros, any recommendations, tips that they have for making a standout application. And you're better able to do that if you are looking at 1 or 2 programs than if you're looking at 5 to 10. So thinking through, again, the resources, not just dollars, but understanding what the trade-off is, which comes into the third bullet. There is ownership and autonomy. Ownership from the pure dilution standpoint of how much you are giving in exchange for the capital and investment, but then autonomy when it comes to, do you have somebody that almost has an equal say as to what the company is doing, or are they just a partner that you are still that still reports to you, if you will? So figuring out what is that relationship, ideally by, yes, reading the documents that they're providing you, but probably talking to people who worked with them before. And then this last point is, I think, a very important one that doesn't probably get mentioned a lot in terms of what happens after the program is complete. And so on the venture studio side, again, we have a lot of questions around, hey, what is the continued involvement, if any, of this organization? What is their incentives to continue to make sure that this company is successful outside of just the ownership that they have on the cap table? But with accelerators or incubators, how do they offer support to their alumni companies? What does that look like? Ideally, again, talking to people who have been to those programs, so you're able to kind of hear the unfiltered truth from them. That'll help you. These questions and probably a couple of others will help you better determine and assess which program is right for you, depending on what stage you are with your business. We'll take another quick pause here. Questions that I missed? Anything else that folks want to talk through as it relates to any of these programs?
Just a question. So something I've been struggling with, right, is I've got a product. I know I can build product. And pre-seed funding is usually framed as here's money to go out and build something, or an accelerator is usually framed as let's help you get to that next stage. So how have you seen, I guess, people with product but no traction get the most value out of accelerators? Is it just like more coaching on company building, on hiring? How have you really seen people level up coming out of accelerators?
I'll let Mickey maybe share some of her perspectives. My quick thoughts there: having a product is good, but I think a program like an accelerator can help you figure out, is it the right product, or what are the features that you need to be building, and whom are you building them for? So building a product is phenomenal, and being able to go from 0 to 1 again with a product. Sometimes, particularly if folks that are going through these programs, the benefit will be maybe I overbuilt, maybe I underbuilt, or maybe I'm not talking to the right customer. Maybe I have a B2B product that is actually a B2B to C product, and so I'm not thinking through that C. Again, it can range widely, but building their product super great. In terms of what you can get out from a program, some of the benefits can come down to honing in on what are the right features, what does the right product roadmap look like, and again, really, who is this creating value for, and pressure testing that to ideally get some sort of early forms of revenue traction, not just user traction, depending on what business you have. But I welcome Mickey to share any perspective that she has.
You said exactly what I was going to say. I think we spend a lot of time, especially the first third of our programs, and I've run programs for the last 8 years, working with very early stage founders, is making sure that you understand the problem that you're solving, who has that problem, talking to potential customers, understanding what their pain points are, understanding how your solution is a fit for their problem. And even with people who already have customers, you would be surprised the number of people that actually don't talk to their customers. Like, so even if you're generating revenue, even if you have traction, maybe you don't understand where that's coming from, you don't understand the actual customer profile that you have to narrow in on getting more of those types of customers. So I think it comes down to just making sure that you have a really solid foundation to build upon, that you have built the right thing, that you can validate that this is moving in the right direction. I think a lot of times founders are spending a lot of time working in the weeds of their business, especially if it's just you, if it's, maybe you have 1 or 2 other people on your team. So we help you pull out a little bit and work on your business and ensure that you are steering the ship in the right direction, and just giving you different perspectives. I think a lot of times, if you're building by yourself or even with a small group, just getting different perspectives, different feedback, getting things pressure tested frequently can really help in terms of opening your eyes up to things that maybe you hadn't uncovered yet, or are validating to what you were already, the direction you're already moving in.
Thank you for that.
Awesome. And the only thing that I would add as well on that is the benefit, particularly on the accelerator side, when it comes to the cohort model. So the fact that you are able to have, at minimum, if it's a 20 program, 20 company program, 19 other CEOs and founders that are able to share with you their perspectives, their strategies, their approaches to all the things that you're thinking through. We know that entrepreneurship is, or can be, at least a lonely journey, and having that that community of kindred spirits can go a really long way in helping you get out of your head, which oftentimes we can tend to do.
I wanted to ask a question about, like, and I don't know if this is the right forum for it, but like just thinking about like the mindset side of things. As I'm not a technical founder, I've been a creative all my life. I thought I would be like Spike Lee, Martin Scorsese kind of world, and then to pivot into this space now where I'm creating a product that is tech centered. What do these programs like offer, like that kind of mentorship that help with like developing that mindset, working through the imposter syndrome, and things like that, because that's something that I'm personally struggling with, where I'm like, bro, this is not your world. Go back to shooting videos and stick to that. And stop trying to like do something bigger. So like, do these programs offer these type of resources as well? Or is that something that as founders, we should be seeking outside of joining these programs?
I appreciate your question, Dre. I'll let Mickey chime in as well, but maybe just to quickly add some context there. I'll speak to friends and family specifically, and then I'll just shed light on a little bit of other programs. On that, well, one is just the name itself. We named it Friends and Family. Some of you may know, but oftentimes folks that look like people on the screen don't have access to the early stage capital that you would otherwise get from friends and family to invest in the business. Maybe it's capital to help you go from part-time to full-time, and it's that vote of confidence that you otherwise wouldn't be able to have because of lack of generational wealth and so on and so forth. I know I wouldn't have that. In terms of the focusing on you as a founder and mentally where you want to be, so friends and family, that's one of the main benefits we've found that's come out from the programming and the structure, but I won't steal too much of Mickey's thunder. In terms of other programs themselves, I think it really ranges and varies. So sometimes folks have like a leadership or executive coach component to them. That's a great question too. That's a wonderful point. If you know that you want that and you need that, that's a great filter basically to say, hey, what do you offer? If you don't offer this, that might not be the right program for you, even though it might be a good program, period. That might not be the right one for you. But Mickey can shed a little bit more light on friends and family.
Yeah, co-signing everything Jesús just said. I think we design these programs really with intentionality of the founders we are seeking to serve and support. And I think a huge part of it is how do you navigate this space as a human, as a parent, as a partner, as all the different identities that you have. Creating a safe space where founders can talk about these things, that can share, past experiences, current experiences. It's really important that we create a sense of belonging and that you feel seen in the representation of the speakers, in the topics we understand that somebody on our team will understand, a very similar lived experience that you have and want to ensure that gets represented in the experience that you have going through our programs. But as Jesús said, I think it's really important to use, if that is something that is important to you, to use that as a qualifying aspect. If a program that you're looking at offers something, or maybe it's a completely different type of program altogether. And something that I'll tell is an organization called Goody Nation that started in Atlanta. And they work heavily across mostly underrepresented founders across the country. They do, I think, these like weekly huddle calls. It's a small group of founders that connect, and maybe somebody on this call is actually part of Goody Nation and wants to share about their experience. But just to be able to be in those types of spaces with founders, they do sessions around like founders need therapy, and so create spaces for people to talk about pressing issues that you're experiencing. So I think when you come up with programs that specifically are trying to serve a more inclusive demographic of founders, that these are the types of conversations that we need to have, because the experiences are going to be very different. The experiences fundraising are going to be very different. And we want to try and equip you with the tools and just kind of like the realities of what this looks like, so that you feel confident going into that room. And Dre, to your point, when we talk about your lived experience as your competitive advantage, like you having this lived experience in this creative space is going to make you better at building, something in a very similarly aligned space. So hope that you have that, you take that with the confidence that you are the person to build what you're building, and that nobody else understands the space as well as you do. And that's what's going to make you, give you the step up over everybody else.
Thank you both so much. I appreciate your answers.
I had a quick question, just generally around the program, the Accelerator program that you guys are offering. Since that you're offering 150,000, obviously you'd be selected for 5% of the company. So that's you're kind of evaluating companies at like 3 million, or where did you settle on like that amount for that amount of equity? Like, how is that determined, and just a general what that looks like to arriving at that sort of valuation or metric?
Yeah, so I mean, the short answer is it's standard 5% for the 150K at $3 million valuation. Different accelerators have different terms, slightly more, slightly less. There's other things that you want to be mindful of. Are they basically going to charge you for the program itself with that capital? So really, it's actually less that you're going to be able to use on the business itself. Those are questions that you should think through and ask. In terms of how we settled on that, we saw the landscape of what was out there. We ultimately felt that what we were offering felt appropriate for the stage that we were going to be playing at, with the caveat that we also have our core fund, which is offering pre-seed and seed capital. So it's non-negotiable for the 20 companies that participate in our program. So more of nuance there, and then maybe a little bit more on the funding. For the companies that do participate in Friends and Family, we advise them not to be fundraising during that time period, primarily so they can focus on building the business itself. In terms of Slauson core fund funding, we will evaluate any whom want to actually formally pitch us after the program. So ask that folks don't fundraise, period. And if they want to fundraise and pitch us directly, we welcome that, but after the program. But I'll let Mickey maybe share any other additional points if she has any.
No, we pretty much covered it. I think we did an assessment of what other similar programs working with similar stages of companies are offering, and wanted to make something that was one, competitive to that, but also founder favorable. And we kind of ran this against a number of other founders that we've worked with in terms of, would you accept this over this? Would you, and kind of try to validate that this was something that made sense, I think, for the stage, and that it was something that would, be an easier yes or agreeable for the founders. And for the most part, what we came across was this was actually absolutely the right space to be playing.
Awesome. So I know we have 10 minutes left. We can talk more about Friends and Family if you have any questions, or just any general questions that are not related to any programming, but more tied to your specific company, maybe where you are at with your company and your business. So we can make it as specific as you'd like to go. Welcome folks who haven't asked a question or shared to share as well. But right, yeah, we have 10 minutes, so we'd love to maximize the time based on what folks want to ask or to share.
I just want to say thank you. I was muted, so thank you for your answer.
No problem.
Jesús, wanted to ask, given this present market condition, I mean, obviously you mentioned that most companies that get involved with each other.
Oh, you're cutting out there. I'm not sure if it's just me.
Can you hear me a little bit better
you're
now?
Good now.
All right, perfect. Apologies for that. So obviously you mentioned that there's 150K exchange for 5 to 8% equity in the company at a $3 million valuation, or 5% equity at a $3 million valuation. With that being said, when you tend to write those checks for 150K, are there specific verticals that are more appetizing to you at the moment? And I'm asking from the perspective of being a founder of an AI company. So I just wanted to ask, AI, is it consumer, B2B SaaS, anything in particular that tends to catch your eye in particular at the moment in the market?
Yeah, I mean, one of the benefits this might not be a satisfactory answer. One of the benefits that we have of having the Friends and Family program is we're able to see what the market offers is currently offering in terms of innovation. And so we do have a post of different categories that we have an interest in. Maybe Eileen can drop that, of just some general macroeconomic things that we're thinking through internally, like elder care, for example. We know that with the baby boomers retiring, there is a large opportunity to service that population. in a way that we've never seen before, in terms of wealth transfer, in terms of them being business owners and transferring ownership to other parties, etc. So there's some categories which we can share, but the short level in terms of verticals, we are trying to very strategically be very open to what current innovators like yourselves are operating and offering, and in terms of what you're building. In terms of AI, we welcome those types of technologies. As you're probably aware, a lot of the funding that right now is going into that space is a lot at the infrastructure level, as opposed to the application level. I'm not saying that that's not going there to begin with, but yeah, we're trying to be very intentionally not siloed in terms of how we're thinking about sectors and verticals. And because it's at the earliest stage, typically at the pre-seed and seed, our average pre-seed checks are around 900K, and average seed checks are about 1.4. So really us being able to offer this 150K investment helps us get much more, or involved much earlier with a company than we otherwise would have been at the pre-seed, depending on the areas that we look for. On the Slauson Co, leaving aside friends and family for a second, on the Slauson Co side, our two primary theses, our B2B thesis is SMB tech and culturally aligned consumer. So in terms of business models, or who the target you're serving, we care a lot about, are you trying to service small and medium business owners one of the primary reasons is in terms of the number of companies that are being started right now. Those are disproportionately started by people of color, and more specifically women of color. And so there's a kind of a double whammy benefit, if you will, of if we are backing innovators, entrepreneurs that are building tools that are servicing these business owners, they're able to help them scale their operations, deliver a more seamless customer experience that can help them generate more revenues, grow, etc. That feels aligned with what we want to see more of in the world, in terms of impacting the Slausons across the US at least. So probably an unsatisfactory answer, but we really want to be open to what the market is offering right now.
Thank you. That perfectly answers my question.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for asking. We have 5 minutes left. Love for folks to share maybe one or two more questions that we can address.
Hey, this is Micaiah Green. I'm the founder of Get Free Media, and I have a question. I am building a disruptive media company and collective studio model. I'm sure all of you are aware of just the strikes that have been happening in Hollywood, and I'm basically wanting to build an alternative infrastructure to Hollywood. Obviously, this is a very cash intensive industry. Is very expensive to produce film and TV. And so I've been running into almost like this chicken and egg situation where I feel like a lot of these programs are asking for MVPs and like a demonstration of, the product. And at the same time, I'm like, I need a lot of money to really start. Obviously, I have my own track record in the industry, and like, that's great. But I just am looking for some guidance around, I guess, the types of programs that you think would be best for such a cash intensive business, and I guess like a route that you think would make the most sense.
Yeah, no, thanks for your question. So I'd say I'll talk about venture capital specifically for a second. Venture capital tends to skew. There's always anomalies. We can get into the WeWorks of the world and those quirks there. But generally speaking, a venture capital model is going after highly scalable ventures. And so if you are building something that is aligned with that in terms of how you can leverage capital to show some sort of MVP that leverages technology to show that there is scalability to what you're building, I think that's the best way to start. If you're raising a company that's going to be producing content and it's always going to be heavy on the cash side, then that's just, it is what it is, and you don't need to shy away from that. That just means you have to be upfront with investors, and you have to be raising a significant amount of capital to launch that business. So as long as you're honest with what you want to build and you're raising the appropriate capital for that, then I think you should find the right investors whose risk appetite is aligned with that and who are willing to write bigger checks to support what you're building.
Awesome. Thank you.
Could I share something really quick that just helped me get to my MVP really fast? And that was just like, we adopted a mindset because we don't have a technical background of launching fast, learning slow. And then finding what would allow us to go to market without spending a lot of cash, because we don't have a lot of cash on hand. So we just leveraged like platforms like Envato, where they had ready-made templates that we were able to inject into WordPress. So right now, if you went to sparksocial.online, you would see our like digital marketplace is very minimal. It's ugly and it's not everything that we want. But we knew that if someone was asking to see like our MVP, we're able to leverage that. As something that is content heavy, requires us to produce a lot of content. We didn't want to focus so much on the content right now. We wanted to make sure that we had something that we could show, and then at a low level produce content that was very generic and not what we want at that high production level as of yet, but something that we were able to show like, hey, this is where we're starting, this is where we're going. So I would maybe suggest like, hey, look and see if there's a template or a theme that you can inject into WordPress to at least show what the potential of your MVP would look like.
Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you for chiming in there, Dre. We probably have time for one more question.
I have a
folks
question.
can drop off. Yeah, please.
Jesus or Mickey, if you can answer this, can someone maybe in a one line explain your heart out, whatever you feel? What is the difference between pre-seed and seed? I feel like this changes depending on who you talk to, and it makes my head spin. Someone help.
I mean, it's a little bit of, it's in the eye of the beholder. I'd say my quick rule of thumb, the way that I think about pre-seed and seed is maybe a quick way to think about it, not the only the way to think about it, is just dollars raised. So if you're raising something below, call it 1.5, maybe maximum $2 million, that's probably more of the pre-seed stage. And if you're raising anything north of 2, especially like 2 to 5, I would call that definitely seed territory. In terms of pre-seed, that's typically where you would find a company that might be might have early signs of traction, or maybe they're wanting to hire a full-time team because they've been operating with a lot of part-time talent, and now they're ready to bring that team in-house and offer salaries and things of that nature. At the seed, you're typically probably going to see a little bit more of a built-out team. They're probably all working full-time. You have the right sorts of talent in place, whether that's technical, whether that's sales, marketing, what have you, depending on what you're building. And the product is there's definitely much more data points at the seed than there are pre-seed, and therefore more questions or more expectations will be had because you're raising more capital. Nikki, if you want to share anything else, feel free, please.
It makes my head spin too, Diane. You're not the only person. It does really depend, I think, on who you talk to. I mean, I think there was a point where Series A now is, or what is, like the goalposts keep moving. And so I think it's more so probably important to figure out like what type of capital you need, and then try to figure out, okay, who's aligning with kind of stage of capital in terms of maybe where you are in your product development stage and your milestones, things like that. I think that there are, in the last few years, have seen a lot more of these like grant program opportunities that are specifically targeting women of color, founders of color in general, to help them just get to the next step, right? And so if that is trying to be able to build something that you can have people test and then get validation from, because I think there's some founders can unfortunately walk into a VC's office and with a pitch deck only and get a very large amount of funding. But the reality is that that's, for the most part, very difficult to do. So I think it's just around just educating yourself on all the different types of capital options that are available to you, really determining, is venture the right way to go? And for most companies, it's not, and that's okay. But I think it's just a matter of, exploring all the options that are possible, and how do you get to actually generating revenue, and then making that revenue work for you and building that.
Okay, that helps. Thank you. It's something my head's always spinning on.
Yes, not fair to founders. And that we've actually had sessions where we talk about more in depth our distinction of them. We are over time though, so thanks especially for you all who stayed the whole time. Have a wonderful rest of your day and week. Again, our friends and family applications are open. We dropped in the link. Feel free to share with any other folks. But thanks for joining us. Have a great day.